Welcome to our second lecture video. In this video, we will focus on some important usability principles to keep in mind when designing multimedia learning materials. While these principles are focused on web design, they're applicable to many forms of multimedia as well as learning management systems. To simplify the process a user goes through to comprehend the information presented, an effective interface design must be implemented. Users do not want to deal with confusing layouts, complicated menus, and unclear button options when they are trying to access information or navigate through a site. If you are going to design for the web, these three suggestions should be kept in mind. First, utilize common design principles to make your web application or site more intuitive to use. Second, focus on the user. Consider how the user will interact with the interface. Third, remember, things that are intuitive to a programmer or a designer might not be intuitive to the target audience, so keep that end user in mind when creating an intuitive design. The following 10 principles of design offer a guide to enhance the usability of an interface. First, let's focus on affordance. This is the extent to which the physical characteristics of a design suggest how the user should interact with the interface is affordance. User-friendly design should optimize efficiency and ease of use, making the function and use seem intuitive or obvious. For instance, most users know that underlined colored text on a website indicates a link that, when clicked, will bring up information related to the underlined word or phrase. The example on the right shows icons that match physical characteristics in order to optimize efficiency. Chunking is the breaking down of information into chunks or components to improve the reader's ability to comprehend, access, and retrieve information. This principle is most commonly seen on interface submenus and menus where 4 or 5 options are offered. Don't chunk information to be searched or scanned, and limit the number of chunks when you want people to recall or retain information. This is an important element to remember when designing learning material as well. There are 2 ways to think about chunking information. You're either taking one big piece of information and breaking it down into groups, or taking many small pieces of information and grouping them together. By organizing learning material in this way, you'll help learners understand how material connects and be able to retrieve pertinent information as needed. To improve a design, color can be used in a number of ways. Not only does color enhance aesthetics, it can also be used to attract attention, indicate meaning, group elements, and symbolize different emotions or meanings. Keep in mind that if you use color to convey meaning, color-deficient users or cross-cultural associations may have a less than desirable effect. Be aware of these cultural differences and utilize alternate symbols or text so the design is not entirely color-reliant for learners with color deficiencies. Also remember that certain color combinations can cause visual discomfort to the viewer by appearing to vibrate or by creating an afterimage. Be purposeful with the colors you utilize to avoid your colors becoming a distraction. Consistency plays a role in creating intuitiveness. By using familiar mental models and presenting the same models in various applications, you can reduce the learning curve for users. If the user already knows how to use the controls for one product or page, they will know how to use them in other instances if consistency is used. In web design, navigation should give the user an idea of where to find the information they need. Human nature, for most people, causes them to automatically group items placed together as a unit. Conversely, items placed apart are perceived as separate items. Web design should implement the principle of proximity to emphasize an item or to group related items. Labels should be provided that differentiate groupings of similar elements. Below, you'll see the difference when proximity is used to group a list of similar items. Readability is measured by the ease in which words, sentences, and areas of text can be read. Aspects that can affect readability might include the space between the lines and words, the complexity of the grammar, the length of sentences, and the positioning of paragraphs and headings. It's important to keep content in proportion and utilize whitespace to make the flow of the interface easy for the audience. Whitespace can break up various sections and make the page appear balanced. When looking at the simple design of text, it is important to keep in mind whether the background has texture, the color of the background, text color, and font choice. Highly contrasting colors are necessary for maximum readability. Black text on a white background, though boring, is the easiest for users to read. The chart below shows some examples of color choice and how it affects readability. Notice how some of these colors, when put together, cause the text to seem to vibrate. The concepts of recall and recognition involve memory. When the brain carries out separate tasks, it works somewhat differently. Recognition is seeing something as familiar or something you've seen before. Recall is the retrieval of information stored in long-term memory. This requires abstract thinking. Users will recognize things easier when a stimulus prompts them than when they have to extract information from their memories. When possible, you should always promote recognition instead of recall. For instance, instead of asking the user to remember rubric categories, a drop-down menu of different options should be provided. The example below shows how Tumblr gives options of blogs that users can recognize rather than having to recall the name of a blog they were interested in previously. How information is positioned on a page is alignment. Alignment sends subconscious messages to the brain and helps guide the eye of the user. Alignment also groups related elements or concepts in an orderly fashion. To create visual connections, elements should have edges that line up along common rows or columns, or so that their bodies line up among a common center to unify the look of a page. Since you would likely be designing for Western cultures that read left to right, you should left-align paragraphs with only headlines and short captions centered. Humans like to group like items with other like items, utilizing different aspects such as size, color, shape, and orientation. To reduce complexity of the website, make related items look similar. If two buttons do the same thing, make them look similar. You can also do the opposite by creating an anomaly. Alter one object in order to draw attention to the difference. This is often seen on confirm versus cancel pages, or when one button will save while the other will delete. Effective designs should indicate the status of the user's interaction, like the image at the top of the page. If a user fills out and submits a form on your website, there should be some sort of visual indication that the form is being processed or was processed, so the user is aware of its status. Good design should also show what actions can be performed and what the results of those actions will be. All important elements and options for a given task should be easily visible. For example, if a search bar is one of the most important elements in your web application, users should be able to easily find it. They should not have to scroll or sift through multiple sections to locate it. The game user interface image shows a good example of obvious buttons that show options for actions, as well as a loading page to indicate status. The material from this lesson came from Robin's Learning Web Design. I look forward to seeing how you utilize these design principles in your e-portfolios and in your professional careers. Thanks for watching.